Hearing that my uncle and aunt planned to sell me to a violent widower, I fled to the capital overnight, seeking refuge with my fiancé, to whom I was betrothed by family arrangement. My fiancé was not in the city, so his younger brother reluctantly stood in for him and completed the wedding ceremony with me. However, before my husband could return, evidence of the Wen family's treason surfaced. General Wen coughed up blood and died on the spot, while his younger son was beaten so severely that he was left paralyzed below the waist. Staring at the shattered Wen family, I thought about leaving once my husband came back. But that wait lasted until my brother-in-law rose to the pinnacle of power. That night, he knocked on my door, his face flushed. "Sister-in-law, what did you give me to drink? My body feels so hot." I was baffled. "Hot water. If you wanted to add something, you could have done it yourself."
1.
I've always had bad luck. At 6, a plague took my parents, and I was sent to live with my strict uncle. At 16, just when I thought I had grown up, my uncle and aunt decided to marry me off to a widower who had beaten 3 wives to death. To survive, I clutched my father's marriage contract and endured countless hardships on my way to the capital. My father's sworn brother was none other than the formidable General Wen. The old general wept bitterly upon seeing me and immediately decided to marry me to his eldest son, Wen Shiji. But Wen Shiji was not in the capital, so his younger brother, Wen Shirling, had to perform the wedding rites in his place. Dressed in wedding robes, Wen Shirling clung to a pillar in front of all the guests and shouted, "How can some country bumpkin marry my brother? Father, have you lost your mind? How can you still take this outdated agreement seriously? She's just here to climb this social ladder. I'd rather die right here than complete this wedding in my brother's place." With my head bowed, all I could see were my embroidered wedding shoes. I clenched my teeth to resist the urge to lift my veil and slap him. In the end, when Shirling was bound hand and foot and forced to complete the ceremony with me, I officially became the Wen family's eldest daughter-in-law. But as I said, my life has always been full of hardships. Just 3 months after our marriage, the second prince presented evidence that the crown prince and Wen Shiji had secretly conspired to rebel. The crown prince was imprisoned, Wen Shiji went missing at the border, and the rest of the Wen family members stationed there were executed. General Wen spat blood onto the imperial decree confiscating his estate and died on the spot. The emperor showed mercy by only breaking Wen Shirling's legs, leaving at least one survivor of the Wen family. Wen Shirling personally wrote the divorce letter on behalf of his brother. She never even met my brother, so she's not truly part of the Wen family. Once arrogant and proud, young Master Wen lay pale on the ground, forcing a smile as he begged the eunuch delivering the decree for leniency. The eunuch, out of pity, allowed me to collect my dowry. Desperately, I stuffed whatever jewelry I could into the small bundle I had arrived with. The remaining Wen family members, still kneeling, muttered, "She came here looking like a beggar. What dowry does she even have?" Ignoring their hopeless, empty stares, I fled the Wen household in a panic.
2.
A month later, the sensational Wen family case finally settled. Rumor had it that out of the once grand Wen family, only the crippled Wen Shirling and the elderly Madam Wen remained. Out of respect for the late general's past military achievements, the emperor allowed the 2 of them to stay in the now-empty general's manor. Late at night, I climbed back into the estate from the old pagoda tree in the backyard. The imperial guards had withdrawn, leaving the once lively and prestigious mansion eerily silent. The cold lanterns swayed in the wind, their dim glow flickering in the darkness. I rushed to Madame Wen's chambers and returned the valuables I had taken. "Madam, at least keep some silver for emergencies." In just 1 month, she had aged 10 years. Her once well-maintained hands were now covered in wounds. She fumbled across the table before finally grasping mine. "Good child, even if you hadn't come back, I wouldn't have blamed you. I'm just grateful you weren't dragged down with us. Your husband has gone to the afterlife to apologize to your parents first. As for me and Shirling, we won't last much longer." She pushed the money back to me, then unsteadily opened the wardrobe, revealing a sleeping child inside. I recognized her as Wen Fengqing, the 3-year-old granddaughter of the Wen family's second branch. I beg you, have mercy. Don't let this innocent child end up in a brothel. Madame Wen knelt before me, her dim, cloudy eyes filled with a desperate plea, begging me to take Wen Fengqing away. The once glorious Wen family was now either dead or gravely ill, leaving only a child too young to even speak clearly, with no one to rely on. For 3 months before the disaster, General Wen and Madame Wen had treated me like their own daughter. And after everything fell apart, when Shirling had humbly pleaded with the soldiers to spare my life, I helped Madame Wen to her feet and solemnly told her that I wasn't leaving. I would stay to take care of them. I don't believe the Wen family could have committed treason. Sooner or later, the young general will return. I can't let him come back to find an empty mansion. After comforting Madame Wen, I went to check on Wen Shirling. Only one servant remained by his side, Ke Shu, the boy who had grown up with him. He had secretly returned after securing his freedom. Without treatment, Wen Shirling's lower body was festering, barely holding together. If the weather hadn't cooled, he would have already succumbed to infection. Even so, his breathing was weak, his body burning with fever. Ke Shu sobbed, saying all the money had been spent. The officials who confiscated the estate had left nothing behind. The 2 doctors he had hired were paid with years of his saved wages. Through tears, he wailed, "If young master dies, who's going to pay me back the money I saved for marriage?" Before dawn, I snuck out of the estate and exchanged all my remaining jewelry for silver at a pawn shop. I bought medicine and fed it to Wen Shirling for 3 days before he finally managed to open his eyes. The first thing he said was as unpleasant as ever. "Why are you still here? There's nothing left in my family for you to take." 3. Wen Shirling's medication was like a bottomless pit, and the family still needed to eat. The silver they had was dwindling day by day. I dug up the untouched rare flowers in the garden and traded them for vegetable seeds. With the extra money, I bought hens and chicks. The once flourishing garden, filled with blooming flowers, had now turned into a vegetable field. The doctor said that Wen Shirling's legs would be difficult to heal. If they found a skilled physician and rare medicine, he might be able to stand again, but he would never be as he was before. Given their current situation, affording basic medicine was already a challenge. Where could they find rare treatments or expert doctors? In other words, Wen Shirling was crippled and would never stand again. When he learned the news, he showed no reaction at first. That night, Ke Shu rushed over in a panic, saying that Wen Shirling had tried to hang himself. However, with his disabled legs, he couldn't even climb onto the table. While struggling, he knocked over a teacup, waking Ke Shu. Wen Shirling leaned against the bed, looking as lifeless and broken as a rag doll. The old madam slapped him hard, then broke down, throwing herself onto him and wailing, "Are you trying to take me with you? If you die, I won't be able to live either." Wen Shirling remained as lifeless as still water, but from that day on, he refused to eat or take medicine. I stirred the medicine, reheated 3 times already, feeling utterly distressed. This bowl of medicine cost a qian of silver. If he wouldn't drink it, I might as well drink it myself. I slammed the bowl down on the table. "So you're crippled, so what? If the dead members of the Wen family knew you were this weak and self-loathing, they'd come back to scold you in your dreams. Do you think your crippled legs are worse than their deaths?" Wen Shirling finally reacted. His eyes turned red, and he became agitated. "What do you mean, just crippled? What do you know? How is this any different from being dead?" "There's a huge difference." I raised my voice. "As long as you're alive, there's still hope. Your eldest brother's fate is still unknown. Looking at the bigger picture, the Wen family has yet to clear its name from the false treason charges. Looking at the smaller picture, the old madam and Fengqing still rely on you to survive. If you die, you'll have peace. But have you ever thought about how they, a frail old woman and a little girl, are supposed to live? Even if you have to crawl out and beg, you must provide for them. I have no blood ties to your family. I'm just a countryside woman. Are you planning to dump your responsibility on me? Drink it if you want. I'm not wasting a qian of silver." I was so furious that my whole body shook. Without thinking, I gulped down the entire bowl of medicine and stood up abruptly to argue with him further. But perhaps I stood up too fast. Before I could say anything, my vision twisted and everything went black. 4. When I woke up, I was lying in Winshirling's bed, with everyone gathered around me. The old madam held a bowl of chicken soup, feeding me. Shirling thought the medicine was poisoned, but it turns out you just fainted from hunger. Every time we eat, you say you've already eaten in the kitchen. From now on, if you don't eat, we won't eat either. Fengqing reached out and touched my lips. Auntie, eat the chicken drumstick. When Shirling sat by the window, his gaze cold and distant. But Kei Shu said he had panicked, so much so that, despite always refusing to get out of bed, he had desperately crawled outside, yelling for help. Back at my uncle's house, I had also gone hungry often, so I was just trying to save food for the elderly, the sick, and the weak. I didn't expect to actually faint from hunger. Feeling the wastefulness, I forced myself to finish half a chicken but insisted on giving the drumstick to Fengqing. When Shirling no longer sought death, he even drank his medicine on time without needing to be fed. The doctor said that, with persistent effort, his crippled legs could gradually regain enough strength to stand while supported. Once his spirits improved, I bought cheap Xian paper and told Wen Shirling to go to the market and write letters for people. Wen Shirling clenched the paper, his hair nearly standing on end. You want me to write letters in the streets? I busied myself changing his bedding. His legs needed frequent dressing changes and the bedding got dirty quickly. Your hands aren't broken. You can't just sit at home and eat for free. Even Fengqing knows how to help. 3-year-old Fengqing followed me around every day. When I washed clothes, she sprinkled soap pods. When I tilled the soil, she picked up beans. The old madam, whose eyesight had improved, embroidered handkerchiefs to supplement the household income. Kei Shu worked labor jobs during the day and repaired furniture at night. Thinking of all this, I furiously threw down the bedding. You're the most useless one in the whole family, yet you cost the most money. When Shirling was stunned speechless, his fingers trembling. Growing up, his elder brother was skilled in both literature and martial arts. To reassure the emperor, Wen Shirling had been raised in extreme comfort. He had always been pampered. Before the family's downfall, even picking up a handkerchief would earn him a few words of praise from his mother. Wen Shirling was unconvinced. Very unconvinced. People used to say he was just as talented as his brother. The next day, before leaving for work, Kei Shu dragged Wen Shirling to the Wen residence's front gate. A small table, a small stool. The once glorious young master of the Wen family now sat in the streets, writing letters for 3 Wen per page. 5. The old madam was deeply worried about Wen Shirling and kept peeking from behind the door. Out on the bustling street, Wen Shirling looked around helplessly. I shook out my clothes and said, Madam, just let him try. Spending a lifetime locked in that room will do him no good. A crippled leg isn't the end, but a broken spirit is. Despair and hopelessness had weighed down the Wen family for too long, and it showed on Wen Shirling's face every day. But I firmly believed that life was something you had to push through. As long as one lived, anything was possible. If Wen Shirling continued shutting himself off from the world, refusing to face the reality of the Wen family's downfall, he would never stand up again. And if he never stood up, the Wen family would truly be finished. That was why I provoked him, forcing him to confront the harsh truth, the mockery, the disdain, hoping it would make him regain his resolve and shoulder the burdens of this crumbling household. On the first day, no one stopped at his stall. On the second, word spread, and an old acquaintance rode over on horseback. Those wealthy young men, dressed in fine robes, leaned down from their high horses, looking at their former friend with curiosity, their gazes occasionally landing on his crippled legs. When Shirling's face turned from red to black before he finally composed himself and asked if they needed a letter written. One of them, likely someone he had never gotten along with, deliberately mocked his legs and ridiculed his brother's supposed treason. When Shirling remained silent, his gaze lowered. When they tired of mocking him, they tossed a few taels of silver at him. claiming it was a reward. That evening, Kay Shu helped Wen Shirling back into the house, and he never came out again. I knocked on his door with a bowl of food, but it was completely silent inside. Leaning against the door, I started talking about my uncle and aunt. When I was little, after my parents died, my uncle inherited our land and house. The first thing he wanted to do was sell me to a brothel. To stop him, I slept in the pigsty and got up before dawn to cut pigweed and cook. During the day, there was never an end to the chores. While they sat inside by the fire, I washed clothes by the frozen river. My aunt sold the silver bracelet my mother left me, and I had to smile and say it was a good sale. When their son wanted to eat the dog I raised, I had to kill it and skin it myself. The villagers all said I was heartless. But if I wasn't, I would have been the one sold or dead. If you live according to others' words, then whatever they say you are, that's what you'll be. But if you live for yourself, you'll become whoever you want to be. After I finished speaking, there was still no response from inside. I dusted off my clothes and got up to leave. Just then, the door creaked open. When Shirling clung to the doorframe, his forehead covered in sweat from the pain. His face was pale as he tossed a few taels of silver at me. "What are you rambling about? I made money today. Tomorrow, go buy some meat. You're as skinny as a twig. If you faint again, I won't bother calling for help." Chapter 6. The vegetables in the yard had ripened, and the old hen had laid a small basket of eggs. Under the silver moonlight, the mid-autumn festival arrived. I steamed a big bowl of eggs and prepared several fresh dishes. For once, there was laughter at the normally gloomy Wen household. The old madam scooped up a spoonful of egg custard and handed it to me. "We're alive today, all thanks to Ji Shui." Flustered, I gripped my chopsticks. Wen Shirling also placed some food into my bowl and softly said, "Thank you." After dinner, an unexpected guest arrived at the back door. A girl in a hooded cloak knocked for a long time. When I opened the door, her beauty nearly dazzled me. Her skin was like porcelain, her features as delicate as a goddess. Kay Shu recognized her immediately and exclaimed in delight, "Miss Yulu, Yang Yulio, the legitimate daughter of the Minister of Revenue." Before the Wen family's downfall, she had a childhood bond with Wen Shirling. Rumor had it that the old madam had once considered arranging a marriage between the two families. But after the disaster struck, the Yang family distanced themselves. No one expected Yang Yulio to come visiting in the dead of night. The moment she saw Wen Shirling, her large almond eyes brimmed with tears. "Brother Shirling." Wen Shirling sat stiffly in his chair, hurriedly pulling his robes over his legs. Yang Yulio tearfully recounted how she had wanted to visit him, but had been stopped by her father again and again. Awkwardly, Wen Shirling fumbled to comfort her. Not only did she come, but she also brought gifts. Fine silks, delicate pastries. For 3 days in a row, she visited, and each time, she brought lavish presents. By the flickering candlelight, I mended winter clothes. The old madam stroked the exquisite fabric with a smile. "Yulu is such a thoughtful child." But then she sighed. "It's a shame. These things aren't useful to us right now." Silk was soft and light, but didn't keep warm. Pastries were dainty, but couldn't fill an empty stomach. For the Wen family as it was now, no matter how refined the gifts, they were nothing compared to a thick winter coat or a sack of rice. The old madam didn't say this aloud, but we all understood. After hesitating for a long time, I finally spoke. "Miss Yang disguises herself and sneaks over every night. Is she really just here to see Shirling?" The old madam's expression shifted, catching the hidden meaning in my words. I continued, "She only comes after dark and refuses to let Kay Shu stay in the study to attend to them. A proper lady values her reputation above all. Visiting a fallen noble's home alone every night. Do you really think Minister Yang doesn't know?" Having lived in the world of politics for so many years, the old madam understood far more than I did. That night, as soon as Yang Yulio left, she pulled me along to Wen Shirling's room. 7. Wen Shirling was in a good mood, and his already striking features seemed even more radiant. Like the old madam, he had long, delicate eyelashes, smooth skin, and a sharp nose beneath his narrow eyes, complemented by finely shaped lips. In the capital, whenever people discussed the most handsome young men, Wen Shirling's name was always on the list. The old madam voiced the concerns that both of us shared. Yu Lu is not that kind of person. Wen Shirling interrupted emotionally. How would a young lady from a noble family know what we need? Besides, she already said that Lord Yang had kept her under house arrest before, which is why she couldn't leave. I refuted. Then why is she suddenly able to go out now? And every time, it's after sunset. I've never been a sheltered noblewoman, but what kind of parents would allow their daughter to go out alone at night to meet a man? Do you really think Lord Yang doesn't know? When Shirling's chest rose and fell with anger. He had grown up with Yu Lu. To him, she was the purest and kindest girl. But now, I was making her out to be calculating and scheming. Furious, he blurted out, "What would a village woman like you know? You're just jealous of Yu Lu and trying to slander her." I was stunned. Jealous? Of what? You're jealous that she's a noble lady, while you're just an orphan who used to fight wild boars for food. His words were utterly cruel. The old madam immediately raised her hand and slapped him. She stood up and pulled me close. Wen Shirling, you must have lost your mind. Everything Ji Shui said today was at my behest. It was my intention. Your leg, your life, and even mine and Fengqing's lives were all saved by Ji Shui. Without her, we would have long since joined her father in the afterlife. And now, you're insulting our savior for the sake of some scheming woman? I won't allow it. If you can't come to your senses, then from now on, I'll consider myself childless. Wen Shirling did not step outside for the rest of the day. He couldn't understand why even the old madam didn't see Yang Yulio for who she truly was. She had watched Yu Lu grow up. How could she not know what a good girl she was? That night, as usual, Yang Yulio arrived after dark, bringing some pastries. Wen Shirling's mood finally improved. Watching her bright, smiling face, he chatted with her about childhood memories. As emotion swelled, Yang Yulio gently leaned her head against his shoulder. I always think about the times when you, Brother Shurji, and I were together as children. Wen Shirling's mind drifted to the past as well. He wondered where his brother was now. Was he still alive and well? Yang Yulio's delicate hand lightly covered his, carrying a faint, subtle fragrance. She softly asked, "Brother Shirling, I heard that the Wen family has a military tally, a token granted by the late emperor, even hidden from his majesty. Is that true?"
8.
On the day the first snowfall blanketed the capital, a group of men suddenly barged into the Jiaofeng division, intent on taking Fengqing away. In the struggle, the old madam collapsed. I was forced to the ground, my hand crushed under the leader's boot as he sneered viciously. Fengqing thrashed in his arms, wailing desperately for me. Wen Shirling, bracing himself against the wall, half-crawled and half-hopped to reach us. Using all his strength, he shoved the enforcer off me, shielding me behind him. Blood seeped through the gaps between his fingers. Wen Shirling roared, demanding to know what they wanted. The man smirked and threw Fengqing onto the ground. "I should be asking you, Wen family, harboring an escaped slave? Looks like you don't care if your entire house gets wiped out." In that instant, we all caught sight of the emblem on the man's waist. It bore a single, unmistakable character, Yang. Fengqing sobbed, trembling in my arms. Wen Shirling, however, suddenly calmed. His voice was steady. "Tell Lord Yang there's no need to trouble my family. The thing he's looking for, I think I might remember something about it." That night, Yang Yulio returned, this time bringing a few physicians and a wheelchair. As she left, she smiled sweetly. "Brother Shirling, I'll come visit you again after the new year." The moment the door shut behind her, Wen Shirling turned back, his eyes dark and murderous, his rage almost tangible. By the end of the year, he was already able to walk slowly again. But he never walked in front of outsiders. Day after day, he remained seated in that wheelchair. The Wen family endured its first silent New Year. Between Wen Shirling and me, there was an unspoken understanding. We never mentioned what exactly the Yang family wanted. As things calmed after the new year, when Sherling, for some reason, decided to teach me how to read. Sitting at the desk, I fidgeted uncomfortably. I don't even know how to hold a brush. In just 6 months, he had grown much taller, now towering over me with an imposing presence. Reaching over me, he picked up the brush. "You'll learn by doing." Or, does sister-in-law still resent my thoughtless words from before? He braced one hand against the table, the other pressing the brush into my palm, nearly encircling me as he sincerely apologized. He had already apologized many times for the harsh words he had spoken in anger. I understood his defensiveness. His heart ached for the woman he loved. To stop his apologies, I had no choice but to focus on learning how to hold the brush. But the entire afternoon, I was too tense to retain anything he said. As the sky darkened, when Sherling put the brush down and smiled good-naturedly. "Sister-in-law, it's fine if you don't remember. We'll try again tomorrow." 9. The old madam said when Sherling had changed a lot. He used to be loud and unruly, but now he had become calm and steady, more and more like his elder brother and father. As new shoots sprouted from the earth, when Sherling leisurely admired my writing. "Not bad." I let out a long sigh and set down the brush. "Then can I go now?" "Not so fast, sister-in-law." He stood up from his wheelchair, once again encircling me as he pressed me back into my seat. "I have a letter. Could you copy it for me?" He pulled out a piece of paper from a hidden compartment. Glancing at it, I recognized only a few characters. Shifting closer to the desk to put some distance between us, I said, "But I don't know some of these words." Lately, I had felt that when Sherling was acting strangely at times. Sometimes he would suddenly get too close, like when we practiced writing, he always had to guide my hand. But just when I started to notice something, he would pull back. Now, he leaned in again. I caught the faint scent of soap on his robes. The Young family had sent over many gifts, but I refused to accept them. We still wore old clothes and ate vegetables from our own garden. His natural demeanor made me wonder if I was just imagining things. Tapping the paper with his long fingers, he smirked slightly. "Just copy it as it is, sister-in-law. If you'd like to learn, I can teach you slowly." He emphasized the word slowly, making me instinctively refuse. I quickly picked up the brush. The sooner I finished, the better. After half a month of copying letters, when Sherling finally began going out, every time he left, a carriage would wait at the back gate. Kay's shoe would push him to the carriage, where someone would help him inside. He wouldn't return until deep into the night. As spring rains fell like precious oil, they also watered the old madam's growing fears. When Sherling always reassured her, "Mother, I won't let you lose another son. Trust me." 10. On the day of the Qingming festival, the old madam prepared to offer incense to the late general and the deceased members of the Wen family. The day before our departure, when Sherling came to me and handed me a package. "Sister-in-law, could you deliver something for me tomorrow?" The destination was a clothing shop on the other side of the capital. It was perfectly normal for a woman to visit a tailor shop. Before I could ask, when Sherling took the initiative to explain, "The Yang family will surely send people to follow us during the incense offering, but this package must be delivered tomorrow." For a moment, the package in my palm felt as heavy as 1,000 caddies. I nodded solemnly. "I'll make sure it gets there." When Sherling rarely smiled, but now a glimmer of amusement flickered in his peach blossom eyes. "Aren't you going to ask what it is?" I simply replied, "I trust you." His smile gradually faded, leaving only a deep gaze fixed on my eyes. That strange feeling in my heart resurfaced. I grabbed the package and quickly left his room. Fengqing was eating candied fruit under the corridor. When she saw me come out, she exclaimed, "Auntie, why are you coming out of Uncle's room? Were you playing together?" Children speak without filter, but if rumors spread about a sister-in-law and her husband's younger brother playing together, others wouldn't take it as innocent. Fortunately, Fengqing was still young. A few jokes distracted her, and she soon forgot what she had said. The next day, after the Wen family had all left, I tied the package securely and slipped out of the residence through a hidden side gate. The clothing shop was in a remote area. I walked for quite some time and had to ask several people before finally finding its sign at the entrance of an alley. The shopkeeper was lazily leaning against the doorway, the flesh on his face squeezing his eyes into slits. Seeing a customer approach, he greeted me warmly. "Miss, looking for clothes? Buying for yourself or your husband?" I glanced around the quiet street and softly spoke the code phrase when Shirling had taught me. "Shopkeeper, do you have any crimson fabric embroidered with lotus flowers?" "Yes, yes, yes. Come inside and take a look." His expression remained unchanged as he welcomed me into the shop. I hesitated, wondering if I'd come to the wrong place, but once inside, the shopkeeper took out a crimson ruchuan and confirmed the code. I checked. "We're out of fabric. Only this piece is left. Will it do?" I exhaled deeply and handed over the package. 11. Later that day, the Wen family returned home. The old madam's eyes were swollen from crying, while Wen Shirling's only showed a faint redness at the corners. He remained composed. Once everyone had retired to rest, I gently knocked on Wen Shirling's door and relayed the shopkeeper's message. After listening, he nodded and pushed his door open slightly. "Sister-in-law, come in and sit." I glanced at the dimly lit room and shook my head repeatedly. "That wouldn't be appropriate." When Shirling chuckled, "I have something to discuss with you. We can go to the study if you'd prefer." Saying this, he struggled to push the wheels of his chair. Seeing his fingers turn pale from exertion, I quickly stopped him. "Let's talk here. Don't trouble yourself." I pushed him back into the room. Since returning to the Wen residence, aside from applying medicine to his wounds and helping him wash when he was unconscious, I had rarely entered his chambers. Back then, he was in a coma, Keishu was clumsy, and the old madam had poor eyesight. I had seen his bloody, mangled legs every day without feeling awkward. Now, stepping into his room again, I suddenly felt uneasy. When Shirling turned up the lamp and began explaining, the Yang family was after the other half of the military tally. They had aligned themselves with the second prince, who had promised that if they found the tally, Yang Yulio would become the future empress. Although the Wen family was either dead or crippled because of this rumor, everyone still eyed them covetously. Thus, when Shirling had to feign cooperation with the Yangs, claiming he had no knowledge of the tally's whereabouts, but suggesting that his father's old subordinates might know something. Using this pretense, he had managed to reconnect with his elder brother's former men and their loyalists. And through them, he discovered that Wen Shiji was still alive. The second prince won't stop until he eliminates all loose ends. The letters I had you write earlier were actually coded messages to our former subordinates and the Crown Prince's faction. I've decided to take Mother and Fengqing to the borderlands. As long as we reunite with the Wen family's remaining forces, we won't have to remain under the second prince's thumb. When Shirling frowned, his expression heavy with concern. After a long silence, he hesitantly asked me, "This journey will be full of dangers, with pursuers at every turn. You're not a Wen family member, so I need to ask, will you come with us?" His question left me deep in thought. At first, I had stayed in the Wen residence out of gratitude, and because I couldn't bear to see the old madam and Wen Shirling waste away from illness. I had told myself that once they recovered, I would leave. And yet I was still here. But if I left, where could I go? My uncle and aunt only saw me as a source of silver and would sell me off if they could. If I remained in the capital, I had neither a husband nor parents, not even a registered household record. Seeing my long silence, Wen Shirling's brows furrowed with worry. "If you don't come with us, what will Fengqing do? She always looks for you. And Mother, she's already anxious when she doesn't see you, fearing you might be hungry or cold." He hesitated before adding, "Besides, you said you would stay until I was better." I'm not fully recovered yet. Outside, rain pattered against the windows, forming a natural drumbeat. My heartbeat seemed to blend into the rhythm, pounding wildly. Under Wen Shirling's expectant gaze, I nodded seriously. "We'll go together." 12. Wen Shirling's arrangements were incredibly swift. The moment I nodded, he told me to go back and pack my belongings. Before dawn, The three of us were already seated in the carriage. Only then did I realize that apart from a slight limp when walking quickly, when Shirling's legs were otherwise no different from an ordinary person's. Kay's shoe drove the carriage, while a dozen robust men rode alongside when Shirling on horseback. Under the morning light, our group set off toward the outskirts of the city. Just after leaving the city, we encountered the first wave of pursuers in the nearby mountains. Those guards were hardened warriors from the battlefield, merciless killers. The ordinary bandits stood no chance. The fight ended in less than half an hour, as easily as slicing melons or slaughtering chickens. The farther we traveled, the closer we got to the border, and the more chaotic it became. Through relentless battles, only 7 guards remained. At first, the old madam and I were terrified, but we gradually grew accustomed to it. The most dangerous moment came when an assassin broke into the carriage. I drove a dagger into the back of his hand, pinning it to the carriage wall. Now, we were only a day's journey away from meeting the Wynn family's troops. Sitting by a wide river, when Shirling and I ate dry biscuits. His right hand was tightly wrapped in bandages, a deep wound inflicted by the pursuers days ago, so severe that the bone was visible. To better care for the old madam and Feng Qing, I had tied up my long hair and fastened my wide sleeves and skirt tightly at my wrists and ankles. Both of us were covered in dirt, looking utterly disheveled. I remarked, even at my uncle's house, I was never this wretched. When Shirling only chuckled silently. I nudged him with my elbow. Are you thinking that I was even worse when I first arrived at the Wynn household? When Shirling had grown much sturdier, he didn't even sway when I pushed him. He fell into reminiscence. When you first came, you were squatting in front of the residence. I thought, where did this poor relative come from, trying to freeload off us? But then, you pulled out a tattered letter, and father said he was going to marry you to my eldest brother. I was furious. Big brother was my idol, so I told father you were ugly and poor. Why should you marry him? As a result, not only did he beat me up, but he also made me take Big Brother's place in marrying you. I wanted to humiliate you, so I caused a huge scene at the wedding. I thought you'd make a fuss too, but you actually endured it. Recalling how Shirling had clung to a pillar, wailing on our wedding day, I laughed as well. That day, I wanted nothing more than to rip off my veil and beat you up. But I knew if I couldn't endure, I'd have to go back home and marry an old widower, so I held on. When Shirling reached out and brushed away a willow seed from my hair. Later, I saw you secretly giving silver to a sick servant girl for treatment. I realized you weren't a bad person. That's why, on the day our family was sentenced, I didn't want you to die with us. I didn't expect you to be so foolish. While everyone else avoided the Wynn household, you actually came back to help us. When I thought I might never leave that place, I seriously considered bashing my head in. But then you scolded me so much that you fainted from hunger in front of me. I thought I couldn't let your little bit of saved food go to waste. I had to live. A breeze carried the restless air of June, when Shirling's gaze held an unreadable depth. But then you told me that not only must I live, but I must live well. Only then would anything be possible. In that moment, I really wanted to slap myself. How could I have been so blind at first, thinking you were ugly and poor? Honestly, our Wynn family was the one reaching above our station by marrying you. His words were so sincere that my ears burned. To ease the tension, I held up my hand close to his cheek. Then I should slap you now to make up for all the times you insulted me. When Shirling caught my hand, and before I could react, he gently pressed his cheek against my palm. Good sister-in-law, spare me for now. Once we're safe, you can punish me however you like. The soft, delicate sensation lingered on my fingertips. His grip was warm and firm. I swiftly pulled my hand back, my throat tightening before I finally stammered, but I'm your sister-in-law." When Shirling laughed at my flustered state, his long lashes flickering. He wiped some dust from my face with the back of his finger, his voice soft. "Let's talk about whether you're my sister-in-law once we're safe." Chapter 13. Fate truly enjoys tormenting me. Seated in the carriage, We could already see the gates of Guqing ahead. Suddenly, from the side, more than 10 men charged at us, their strikes aimed directly at Wen Shirling and our remaining guards. These assassins were far superior to our previous pursuers. Their every move was aimed to kill. An arrow shot through our lead horse, and the carriage tumbled uncontrollably, flipping onto its side. Everything happened too fast. The old madam lost her grip on Fengqing, and the child rolled twice inside the carriage before tumbling out. I lunged for her, but failed to grasp the hem of her clothes. Hearing the clash of blades outside, I gritted my teeth and told the old madam to stay put before rushing out to grab the wailing Fengqing. The cries drew the assassin's attention. I barely had time to throw Fengqing back into the carriage before rolling away just in time to dodge a deadly strike. I scrambled to my feet, not daring to look back, and ran for my life. In a daze, I heard Wen Shirling calling my name, but the sound of a blade slicing through the air was too close. I closed my eyes, resigning myself to death. Swoosh! Suddenly, an arrow whizzed past and buried itself in the assassin's forehead. His eyes widened as he fell backward. Stunned, I looked toward Guqing. A well-equipped cavalry unit was charging toward us, their raised banner emblazoned with a single character. "It's Wen Shirling, look!" I shouted in excitement. Realizing their mission had failed, the assassins scattered, only to be swiftly captured and pinned to the ground by the incoming soldiers. A general rode forward, dismounting only after ensuring all the assassins were subdued. When he removed his helmet, I saw a young face, one strikingly similar to Wen Shirling's. The old madam was the first to react. She staggered forward hesitantly. "Shirji, my son, is that you?" Upon hearing his mother's voice, Wen Shirji hurriedly stepped forward and caught her in his arms. "Mother, it's me." I stood there in shock, watching the tearful reunion unfold before me. Wen Shirji? Wasn't he my long-missing husband? 14. It turned out that Wen Shirji had not gone missing. Upon hearing the news, he had taken the Wen family's men and gone into hiding. The ones who had died before were actually prisoners of war used as decoys. Wen Shirji led the Wen family's personal guards, evading capture until Wen Shirling sent him a secret message. That was when he took his men and seized control of Guqing. I wasn't privy to what happened next. The Wen brothers had us stay in Guqing, but when the snow began to fall again, news arrived from the capital. The second prince's false accusations against his elder brother had been exposed. In a desperate move, he tried to stage a coup, only to be slain on the spot by Wen Shirji, who had come to the emperor's aid. The emperor, already frail, was too weak to withstand the shock. Before his passing, he decreed that the wronged crown prince would inherit the throne. With the new emperor's ascension, Wen Shirji was bestowed the title of General of the Northern Borders, while Wen Shirling was appointed the new Minister of Revenue. By the time we returned to the Wen estate, it had been completely transformed. The gardens were lush with flowers, the glazed roof tiles gleamed, and the crimson pillars stood grand and imposing. Compared to the dilapidated residence where even a leaking roof couldn't be repaired, today's Wen estate was unrecognizable, except for my vegetable garden, which they had deliberately left untouched. Lord Yang had been imprisoned. When Yang Yulio heard of our return, she stood at the gates and wept bitterly. Tears streamed down her delicate face as she clung to Wen Shirling's pant leg, looking utterly pitiful. "Shirjigij, it was all under my father's orders. What could a mere girl like me do? Please have mercy on me. Grant me a way to survive." Wen Shirling helped her up, appearing rather sympathetic. "I'm just a cripple now. How could I possibly help you? But here, I have a small gift, just a token of my gratitude to your father." With that, he signaled for a servant to bring over a roll of silk and some pastries. Before Yang Yulio could react, Wen Shirling stuffed the items into her arms and said with a meaningful smile, "Little sister, you were so kind back then, making sure the doctor didn't heal my leg too well. I will never forget such generosity." The Wen estate was now basking in glory, yet I felt more unsettled than before. My position in the household was awkward. Sensing my intentions to leave, the old madam summoned me. Her words were filled with genuine warmth. Jishui, everything has finally turned out well. Why don't you stay in the Wen family and continue being Shurji's wife? The mere thought of Wen Shurji's cold and severe face made me shake my head frantically. A man like that sleeping beside me? I'd be afraid his killing aura would slice through me in my sleep. Wen Shirling has already written a letter of divorce on his brother's behalf. I think I'd rather leave and start a small business on my own. Under the Wen family's protection, I could live well in the capital even without household registration or a husband's name. But the old madam refused to let me go. If you don't want to be Shurji's wife, then be my daughter. I never had a daughter in this lifetime. Stay with me. You're not going anywhere. With her declaration, a steady stream of jewelry, fine fabrics, and luxurious gifts poured into my courtyard. Everyone in the household treated me with utmost respect. Even my old vegetable garden no longer needed my care. I only had to instruct the servants. Yet, I found myself unaccustomed to this life of idle luxury. 15. Wherever I go, people respectfully call me Miss Jishui, yet whenever I want to do something, the servants stop me. Annoyed, I swat the water with a willow branch. And as if that weren't enough, someone else comes to irritate me. A young servant bows respectfully and says, "Second young master said that if Mrs. Time, he would like to drink the soup you make tonight." I angrily throw the willow branch into the water. Drink, drink, drink. Coming home just to eat and sleep. Is this a damn-in? So, he wants soup? I go to the kitchen, scoop a ladle of hot water into a soup pot, and instruct the servant to send it to Wen Shirling immediately. The servant, holding the pot of hot water, looks like he's about to cry. Miss, this isn't proper. This is just hot water. I wave him off impatiently. Take it to him. He's got a weird habit. After venting, I feel much better and return to my room, planning to bring up my departure with the old madam again tomorrow. Just as I blow out the lamp, a knock sounds at the door. I open it a crack and see Wen Shirling under the moonlight, his cheeks slightly flushed. Sister-in-law, what did you make me drink tonight? I feel so hot. Is he looking for trouble? I roll my eyes. Hot water. If you want something else, add it yourself. It's just hot water. If that can cause a problem, then ghosts must be real. As I start to close the door, Wen Shirling slips through the gap and, very considerately, shuts it behind him. Hey you! The room, unlit, is enveloped in darkness. All I can sense is the heat radiating from Wen Shirling and his slightly heavy breathing. I nervously swallow and step back, only to bump into the table. The teacup on the table tips over with a crisp sound, followed by the soft rolling noise of porcelain against wood. On instinct, I turn to catch it. At the same time, Wen Shirling reaches out and catches my arm, stopping me from escaping. He lowers his head, his voice soft and lingering. I heard from Mother that she wanted you to be my elder brother's wife, but you refused? His breath is so close, so overwhelming. I stiffen and force out a response. Yes. Why? I only married your brother because I had no choice. Now that no one can force me, of course, I'll choose someone I truly like. Wen Shirling draws out an "oh." I feel his grip on my arm loosen. Just as I exhale in relief, his hand presses against my back, pulling me even closer. Our breaths intertwine. If he pushes just an inch more, well, luckily he stops. Then, sister-in-law, what kind of person do you like? No matter how I struggle, his hand remains unmoved. I give up resisting and say, half in surrender, "Can you stop calling me sister-in-law? The divorce letter you wrote is still in my bag. Your brother and I were never really husband and wife." Something about that clearly affects him. His breathing grows heavier. Then what should I call you? His voice is so soft it almost melts into the night. Should I call you a little sister? Or Rishui? It's just my name, yet the way he says it makes me flush with embarrassment. A burning heat spreads from the soles of my feet, creeping up to my head. If not for the darkness, he'd surely see that I'm red as a cooked shrimp. But he's relentless. You still haven't said, what kind of person do you like? If I don't give an answer, he'll keep asking all night. I like men who are afraid of their wives, strictly controlled by them. Happy now. By the river once, when Sherling said that when we reached a safe place, he'd speak to me about us. I had feelings for him. When he made that promise, I was happy. But I've watched him rise step by step, climbing higher into the heart of power. That love, once sweet, became buried under the stark difference between us. I'm just a village girl. Right now, he might think he wants to be with me because of gratitude. But later, when our status gap becomes clear, that gratitude might turn into a shackle, eroding whatever affection remains. Better to stay polite. At least then, I can use this gratitude to ensure a stable life. Men of power always have multiple wives and concubines. They value their authority and pride. So, my answer is my way of rejecting when Sherling. As expected, his breathing halts. Even though I prepared myself for this, the pain still crashes into me, making my eyes sting. Feigning nonchalance, I push his hand away. If you ever meet someone suitable, don't forget, there's still an unmarried little sister at home. I push once.
Twice.
He doesn't budge. Just as I'm about to tell him to let go, from the darkness comes his gritted voice. I just so happen to be afraid of my wife, completely under her control. That makes us a perfect match. Shocked, I stammer. You. Before I can finish, he bites my lip. Not a gentle kiss. A real bite.
I tosteblod.
Only then does he let go, open the door, and throw out a parting shot. Stay home and wait for the wedding. Then he leaves without looking back.
16.
The powerful Wen family, favored by the new emperor, is celebrating a joyous event. Their second young master is getting married. He even requested an imperial decree to bestow a noble title upon his bride before she enters the household. After receiving the decree, I feel like I'm in a daze. The old madam is ecstatic. Now I don't have to worry about you leaving the Wen family. That daze lasts until the wedding. Following tradition, the old madam forbids Wen Sherling from seeing me before the wedding and chases him out of the residence. I don't have to worry about anything, just sit in the bridal sedan. The grand procession parades through the capital before circling back to the Wen estate. Following customs, Wen Sherling lightly kicks the sedan door. His hand, extended inside, trembles slightly. Jishui, I'm here to take you home. Looking at his long, well-defined fingers, I place my own trembling hand in his. He grips it tightly and carefully leads me out. Unlike the confusion and fear of my previous marriage, this time, my heart is filled with anticipation for the future. The wedding night is lively. By the time I hear Wen Sherling's hurried footsteps, I haven't even had time to put my veil back on. There's still a longan in my mouth. We stare at each other. Feeling guilty, I ask, should I put it back on? Clearly drunk, his flushed face is ridiculous. He nearly falls asleep against the door. I drag him toward the bed. After much effort, I finally toss him onto it. But just as I turn away, his arm hooks around me, pulling me under him. As his chest shakes with laughter, I realize I've been tricked. Furious, I twist his arm. He yelps, I was wrong. I won't dare again. We lie there, staring at each other. Embarrassment finally catches up to me. I turn my face away. You're heavy. Get off. Unbothered, he props himself up and studies me. After a while, he comments, you look good in red. Then he kisses me. Soft pecks at first, then more. Before I know it, my waist sash is undone. Panicking, I press down on my clothes. Wait. Don't pull at my. Wait. Where are your hands going? Wen Sherling. MMPH. That night, I barely catch my breath. Later, he murmurs against my ear. I bought you a shop. You can do whatever you want. No need to stay cooped up in a house. Heart trembling, I whisper, thank you. He smirks, his hands wandering. No need for thanks. Just show me your gratitude in action, The night is long, and our future has just begun. The end.